the social consumption of music is where people come together to experience music, which is that would include festivals, concerts. These things happen in venues, in clubs. Clubs are often, I would include them in that, because the music is often recorded, not exclusively, as opposed to live in music venues. But there's a whole range of places that present music, social music experiences. This being one. I was just talking to Rich, who's sitting next to me, who's actually put on events in this space. What I'm going to do to get things moving is I'm going to ask each of our panelists just to give a very brief introduction, and then we're going to start dissecting how we can develop our industry in terms of the social consumption of music, and get some great insights from our phenomenal panelists here. Okay, Matt, can we start with you, please?
Yeah, am I on? Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Matthew Flynn. I'm a senior lecturer in music industries at University of Liverpool, and a member of the Liverpool City Region Music Board. And a lot of my research is focused around live music and live music ecosystems.
Is it working? Sorry. My name is Mike Kill. I'm the chief executive of a trade organisation called the Nighttime Industries Association, and I'm also the vice president of the International Nightlife Association in Barcelona.
It is on. I'm Richard Dyer. I'm one of the co-founders of Skiddle. We're an independent ticket outlet, firstly independent, based just in Longridge, but nationwide, European now. Nearly 25 years of doing that, and I also am a co-founder of the Highest Point Music Festival in Lancaster.
I'm Aaron Meller, Managing Director of Tokyo Industries. We operate an own kind of a collection of independent music venues across the country, 47 venues in the UK and 19 internationally.
Hi everybody, my name's Jay Taylor. I work for the Music Venue Trust. The Music Venue Trust is a charity that was formed 10 years ago with the intention to protect, secure and improve a network of UK grassroots music venues.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Rowlands. I've owned and run the Continental and Ferret music venues in Preston for 15 years and 10 years now, along with and a couple of other colleagues. Okay.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, if I may, I'd like to start with Matt. As Matt's mentioned, he's involved with the University of Liverpool, but you're also part of the Liverpool, Greater Liverpool, what is it, sorry? The
Liverpool City Region.
Liverpool City Region
Board.
Music Association.
Yeah.
So actually, it's interesting that, one of the things that maybe we're looking to do in Lancashire is to combine our voices and might into a powerful movement in a united direction to further everyone's, to enhance our industry. Matt, could you talk a little bit about the benefits, how the Liverpool City Region Music Association, some of the things that it's been able to do, and feel free to connect it to the mapping, the venue mapping scheme that you've been leading on.
So it's been established for just over 5 years. It's a collection of a range of voices from across the music sector within the region. There's 22 members at any one time. It's voluntary. And it brings us together to talk about the challenges that the Liverpool music sector faces across from, we have a certain band associated with us, which brings lots of benefits, but also brings challenges in terms of narrative. We have the same challenges as yourselves in terms of venue stock and sort of venues being able to thrive and survive, and we do quite well there generally. And so there's a range of voices around the room. Our job is to speak to the combined authority and the Metro Mayor and try and drive policy change to advantage the sector. Key thing we did really early on was get agents of change on Liverpool City Council to recognise agents of change in their planning law. We haven't got time to go into what agents of change is, but really it's a way of protecting existing venues, and that really helped in supporting some venues to survive over the last couple of years when they were threatened by property development. More recently, took about 18 months to get done, but we got the return of night buses post-pandemic to support our live sector. And again, it's one of the things that where the mapping stuff that I do comes in, with the university sort of sat between the sector and public local authorities and combined authority, being able to hear those voices together, package that up as a business case, present it to the combined authority, and then apply subtle pressure over a period of time to get something done that individually none of those constituencies would have been able to get done on their own, but collaboratively it works really well. We've just done a piece of research, going back to the question before, on the experience of black music makers, specifically in Liverpool. And so there's lots of initiatives and ongoing things. We tend to have a main board, but then we have subgroups that deal with different things. They sort of task and finish groups. We identify an issue or an agenda. People come together, some people from the board and voices from the wider sector. We try and address the challenge, deliver an outcome, and then move on to the next challenge.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Within that, has there any? I'm thinking of the idea of money. You know, has the association been able to organise? You know, in terms of when issues are identified, has it been able to? How has it addressed those? So you mentioned the night buses. That would have been an expensive. You know, I think the idea in Lancashire, for sure. There are places, towns where people will be going to gigs and they'll have to leave before the end of the gig because they need to get home, you know. So, so it's an interesting, perhaps a parallel initiative, a parallel issue. And actually it's detrimental to the experience of going to a gig if you know you're going to have to leave. In fact, you might not go. You know, there'll be people who will make the decision, well, I can't see it all. It ruins the experience, you know. So, you know, could you expand on that a tiny bit, please?
So, well, there's two strands of funding. So one of the things that we did early on was apply to the combined authority for what they call strategic investment funding. That covers the wages of our UNESCO City of Music officer, who is the person who enacts on many of the things that the board decides. And part pays for the cultural lead at the combined authority. We're also a host of business development initiatives. We've had an ongoing collaboration with PRSF in Liverpool for Liverpool-specific funding through PRSF.
Okay, so that's a PRS Foundation.
Yeah, PRS Foundation.
So it's basically a charity that has that you can apply for money for, but you've been applying for it. As a lot, you know, dare I ask what sort of sums can you say?
So it's like Momentum Fund, so the standard national fund, which is up to 15k, but it's ring fenced for bands with an L postcode within the region. So that's sort of par funded with PRSF through some of the money. So there's business development, skills and talent development, a range of initiatives that we can do. So that's all come through, and certainly during COVID, when we first got the money, we were allowed to put it in, we were able to put in £500,000 worth of emergency funding to a lot of businesses to help them survive until cultural funding came on stream. So the board's acted, you know, if the board existed for nothing else, that was a real significant outcome.
So this idea of facilitating and coordinating, and in a way that it's very difficult to do as an individual.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Though if I can jump perhaps to the other side of the panel to Jeremy. Actually, Jeremy, I'm mindful you're sitting next to Jay from the Music Venue Trust. So the Ferret's had quite, you know, the Ferret is a grassroots music venue. It is the sort of place where new music is incubated, new bands and artists get to learn their craft, try their material on audiences, where scenes are developed. You've benefited from the relationship with, you know, a coordinated organisation such as the Music Venue Trust.
Yes, absolutely. We have. I don't know how many people know, but the Ferret was quite under threat. This is going back 2 or 3 years. our building was going to be, well, basically the Ferret's in a larger mill building, and the landlord decided to put the building up for sale. It was at a price where it really wasn't feasible for the Ferret to buy the building on its own. I think it was 695,000 originally. So we're in a bit of a, well, we're in a very tight corner. We weren't quite sure what was going to happen to the Ferret, and the Music Venue Trust, fortuitously as it turned out, we're in the process of putting together a package where they buy music venues in towns and cities outside of the Londons and Bristols and Manchesters or whatever, where a kind of grassroots music venue really matters to the kind of town. And it was a long process. It was a difficult purchase, but we got there in the end. So now we have a kind of benevolent landlord, one that kind of, you know, that we can sort of deal with and kind of work and kind of develop the whole place, the Music Venue Trust, and Jay is part of the Music Venue Trust, who help facilitate all of this.
Jay, could you tell us a bit more about the Music Venue Trust, please?
Sure. Wow, where do we start? I mean, my role started at the beginning of the pandemic when they recruited regional coordinators. So I was the regional coordinator that started speaking to the Ferret and venues in the Northwest in sort of April 2020. But, you know, the work I largely do, you know, my bit of it is right at the coalface. You know, I largely work in the emergency service for England with my colleague Lloyd, who's sat at the table in the back there. And, you know, venues come to us with challenges and we try to find kind of meaningful solutions to them. One of the big challenges for the sector is that over 90% of them have got a private landlord. And those landlords have got very different ambitions for those spaces than the operators tend to have. So it makes absolute sense that we try to kind of move those away from those landlords, don't really care what's happening inside that building, and put them into the hands of the people who matter, the people who care, and that's the operators and the community, this community. And so the first one that we set up a second charity, Music Venue Properties, and so it's a benevolent landlord, but also some community ownership aspects to it. So the first one we managed to purchase was the Snug in Atherton, which is a suburb of Wigan. And the second one was the wonderful Ferret over the road. And the third one literally just happened, which is the Bunkhouse in Swansea. And so those things are now protected. There'll be no rent increases. I mean, in 2023, the average rent increase for a grassroots music venue was 38%. You know, when you've got a sector that's dancing on the cusp of sustainability with a 5% profit margin, that's a really difficult pill to swallow.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, there's many interesting things about the Music Venue Trust, but the essence of it is that you know, through, I guess, you're uniting, aren't you? You're bringing a united voice of a sector which is actually economically challenged, but also faces lots of other challenges, such as getting kicked out of your location by the landlord, or noise abatement notices that mean you can't. So you know, there's this idea that, you know, if there was the Ferret on its own facing that challenge, what do you think what would have happened, Jeremy? You know.
Well, I mean, inevitably we'd have either had to close or potentially move to another location in town. Whether we'd have been able to find another location or not, I don't know. I mean, the Ferret's a non-profit, and, you know, we might well have got to the point where it's like, you know what, this isn't really working, we're going to have to go and, you know, do something else, and then we'd have lost a kind of, you know, a fairly precious resort, because there's not, you know, Lancashire as a whole isn't really blessed with an awful lot of kind of live music venues, certainly dedicated ones.
But other people, you know, I mean, I know there was support from the civic institutions, so Preston City Council, you know, so, you know, there's also that, you know, it's a community, you know, there's a whole community thing around this.
Yes, certainly. I mean, you know, the crowdfunding we did as well, people were enormously generous. It was, you know, it went far back, you know, back than our wildest dreams, really. And we got there in the end, you know, but that was thanks to a lot of people. A lot of people put a lot of time in it. A lot of bands played for, you know, for free and donated their, the revenue from the evening. It was great.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, but that's a great thing, isn't it? The fact that music is uniting. You know, it's an ecosystem, isn't it? Really, and that people really care about it. You know, to a degree that the local authority is supporting, but actually, you know, the MVT. You know, it's the chair or the chief is Mark David. He has. I mean, he's fairly prolific in opinion and writing about the challenges for the sector. I saw a really good vlog about the, you know, where the ticket money goes, you know, for things like Oasis and so on. But actually, at this end of the scale, the grassroots end, the economics are very challenging, aren't they? You know, did you mention? Were you saying it was a 5% profit margin?
On average, the data for 2023 said that it was a 5% profit margin, but also that the bar, it's about a £150 million loss on the box office that's paid up for by the bar sales. Yeah. So the cultural research and development bit is largely loss leading.
Yeah, there was an interesting part of, which would be great because we've got Rich Dyer here who has set up a really, you know, 25 years of Skiddle. Really? You know, so this is an international business that has grown out of Lancashire. You're based in Goosenar or
Longridge.
Longridge.
Everyone knows where that is.
So, you know, this is an international business that basically sells tickets. Well, would you tell us a bit about it? But I'd be really interested in this article that Mark David wrote. He was talking about how the economics of a ticket site work, and actually they don't get all of the money that you might think they get, and so on. You know, so.
There was an element of myth busting in that piece, wasn't there? I think.
Yes. Yeah. So, you know, and I think, you know, one of the things that came from the first panel is how important knowledge is. But Rich, would you tell us a bit about Skiddle?
Yeah, 2001. Myself and Ben, we met online. We used to chat on a thing called MSN Messenger, for anyone who's old enough to remember that. And we started to realise we had a love for going out. I was living in Carlisle, of all places, at the time, so Preston and Carlisle, the absolute cultural hotspots of the world. If you've ever been to either of them, you'll realise I'm lying. And we created a website that enabled event organisers to add their own listings to a website, which sounds very boring now, but back then, if you wanted to promote an event, you had to either get your wallpaper paste out or you had to fax Mixmag about 3 months before with your line-up and hope that you didn't change or cancel anything. And Ben built a web form, and you press go, and it was on the internet straight away, which doesn't sound that clever now, but back then, you know, we were almost pre-Google in a lot of ways, and we enabled event organisers to be able to promote sites. So from those two hotspots of Preston and Carlisle, we very quickly had listings for London and Birmingham and Newcastle appearing on the site. And more people started using the internet as well. I'm sounding very old here. 5 years later, 4 or 5 years later, we convinced Creamfields and a place called Sankey's in Manchester that we could do ticketing better than what they were doing online, because what used to happen back then was you'd buy a ticket for Sankey's, and because you bought it online, you were in a different queue, it took longer to get in, and it cost you more. And we're like, we need to rip that up, we need to change those rules. Creamfield said you can sell 50 tickets, and long story short, we sold about 3,000 and had to meet Scott Barton at a service station with a big bundle of cash. And now, you know, nearly 25 years later, here we are. We've got 4 offices, got over 100 staff. Mr. Forbett of the Ferret used to work for us back in the day. before he got a proper job. And we sell millions of tickets. We're second or third in line. We're never going to compete with Ticketmaster because they're owned by Live Nation and the answer to shareholders. And at that end of the industry, they don't care about the industry. They care about the money. And it's as simple as that. We tend to work then with a lot of independents, a lot of the bigger promoters, a lot of the smaller groups, and we'll sell tickets for anything, literally from yoga at a village hall right through to
this event.
This
here.
event right here. And last we did Milton Keynes Bowl chasing status earlier on this year and did 45,000 tickets in 22 minutes. So it varies. But that's what
Sounds like it works better than the Oasis ticket debacle there. But yeah, I was actually going
to. I need to stick up for that.
No, I know. They've got bashed, haven't they? But I think
it worked.
The myth busting is quite important, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we've got friends at Ticketmaster. Yeah. They're a very tough day that day, but people forget that Oasis sold 500,000 Nebworth tickets from record shops. So now it's the equivalent of ABBA or the Beatles getting back together. Of course, 15 million people are going to try and get 1 million tickets. Yeah. And no amount of technology. If you all try to get into that there at the same time, it's going to crash. Yeah. There's no answer to it. So,
yeah, it's the market leaders. I think we're just used to. We're not used to. The pressure that system was put under at that time. But yeah, I mean, there was quite a bit of public outcry, really. But I think there's definitely mitigation. And there's that other idea which Mark David was writing about is that Ticketmaster are making loads and loads of money, but actually the economics of it are quite different. And what happens to that money?
I mean, Ticketmaster are making loads of money. Let's not pretend they're not.
Well, yeah.
They
weren't making all of their whole share.
I mean,
and there are costs, and they have a lot of a business should be allowed to make some money, shouldn't it? Really, in fact, actually, that is something I would absolutely encourage. The notion that music is valuable, and people should get paid for it, and that is something that I think we would all like to see happening. But this is a mechanism. Sorry, Rich.
Yeah, no, I mean, selling tickets. The very basics of it is the face value goes to the event organizer. That's then distributed amongst the show to the artists, etc. We get the booking fee. Quite often on the bigger shows, we've also got to give some of the booking fee to the event organizer. They love that. And then we have to somehow put a building over our head, answer the phone, pay the VAT man, everything else out of a percentage of the booking fee. I'm not crying poverty. We do it well. We've been doing it a long time, and every deal is different. But we pass the full face value of the ticket itself, plus sometimes a little bit more to the event organizer, and that comes with risks. We had 4 shows this year go down quite badly because of weather, and you've got people like Martin Lewis sat on the telly going, "Oh, just get a chargeback." Now that chargeback comes, the bank don't cover the chargebacks. They take it from the retailer, and when you're the retailer and you're chasing an event organizer, all of a sudden, what the percentage of the booking fee, so let's be very simple, a £10 ticket, we might see 50p of, but you multiply that up, the customer comes to us for it all. But, Ticketmaster, they're at the other end of the scale. It's Ticketmaster, Live Nation, they're the same company. They're the same thing. And then what makes up a lot of these shows is lots of people that own everything. So, yeah, they definitely can't cry poverty.
Yeah. But I mean, as an example, for this event, I was actually thinking of saying, is there anyone here who hasn't heard of Skiddle? But you all got your tickets through Skiddle, so I guess you must have,
I can go.
So, in essence, this was a free event, and this wasn't, because Rich was on this is, it wasn't unique, exclusive treatment because Rich is on the panel, and this is a service that enables promoters and venues to to do business. And I see this. I see the fact that Skiddle is a homegrown business as something that we should applaud, and the level of ambition and success that it has, I think is an exemplar really to build something like this on this scale. But when I rang up on Monday to make sure that tickets for people who couldn't come gave that we could engineer it so their tickets could go back, and I was ringing up, I was speaking to someone, their wages were being paid by Rich, and the service that they provide, I think, is really good, So this idea of maybe making Lancashire, as much as we can, a circular economy, we would, I think, be a great notion, to carry forward. Can I bring Mike Kill into? So Mike is the chief executive. Well, you've heard what he does, but I was actually at an NTIA ambassador meeting the other day, and it's incredible the things that the NTIA do. Could you tell us a bit about it? And I thought it'd be interesting. There's this idea of legislation, that if you're operating a business, there's all kinds of things that are, as a sector, that it has to deal with. And you become like a conduit for that information, but also you are also there to try and resolve issues, and represent. I've kind of answered the question, haven't I? Mike, could you elaborate?
Thanks for answering that for me, Tony.
Thank you.
Just to let everyone know, I've known Tony over 20 years through lots of different experiences. So the NTIA realistically is it's a trade body first, with just under 11,000 members across the UK. We've got commissions in Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland, where we have separate boards that feed into our main board. But in real simple terms, we're a lobbyist activist group. The lobbying takes place where we sit with all the government departments, from Department of Business and Trade, DCMS, which is the Culture Department, Home Office. And to be quite honest, during the pandemic, I was including as many times as I was kicked out of ministerial meetings because of me telling the truth and being quite direct with ministers, particularly on some of the support that was sort of out there. But we are known probably more likely for things like the campaign around saving Brixton Academy, where we got something like 30,000 representation letters to the local authority within about 2 weeks. And we're also known for something called Letters Dance, which is a campaign driving for funding to be given to electronic music and sound system culture, when DCMS during the pandemic decided not to be as clear in supporting everything, including live music, for us as an industry. We work very hard, not only on a regional base, and we've got some 80 odd ambassadors which represent within cities and towns across the country, and they're quite active in terms of understanding the sort of nuances within the locality. And Tony being one of the that network of people, and as you heard, is part of a meeting where we give updates. But what we do very well is lobby very hard. The budget is coming on the 30th of October. We were involved heavily with things like Martin's Law. I sit on the GCHQ group for Martin's Law, so we've managed to get that legislation through without it being too onerous. We sit with people like Jonathan Reynolds and Rachel Reeves and etc. in terms of having some very robust conversations around what we want to see in the future of legislation around licensing and how planning is going to change. And I also sit on things like the senior leadership group for the Mayor of London, and Sasha Lord is our chair of our board. So and there's a few people on the panel that I work with. Matt and Aaron was one of the sort of founding members of the NTIA in the early days and still sort of involved to a point. Yeah, that's what we do. I mean, the reality is we put pressure on. We make sure that the industry is heard, but we've got quite a substantial media footprint, which we learnt about this morning when the internet wasn't fantastic in here and I couldn't get online. I was trying to do a BBC interview, and the gentleman that held the camera earlier, you're an absolute god wherever you are, so thank you. But there you are. Watch out later on, BBC News, you are the man.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mike. So over to Aaron. So Aaron, the thought occurs, one of the things that I'm very keen to do, is in Lancashire, there are some amazing things that are happening. There's some amazing venues. There's some amazing artists and bands and some brilliant people who work, as part of the supportive infrastructure. The sound people. By the way, thank you, etc. There's lots of things, lots of components, lots of different jobs and aspects to this industry. I'm very keen to see, to celebrate Lancashire, the great things that are going on. We've had some remarkable successes in the past. There are some great things happening now, and there will be some remarkable successes coming in the future. But I think it's always good to kind of put under a spotlight as much as we can these things. So, it's very keen to celebrate what everyone is doing out there. We've kind of got under a spotlight, we've got Rich, who's developed two very successful businesses and promoted and worked with lots of great. I'm looking at loads of faces here. I'm looking at Lancaster Jazz Fair. I can't. If I start, I won't stop. But Aaron, you started not in Lancashire, but in a northern provincial town, and you basically grew a business that's worth maybe around £100 million today, out of a significant amount of money.
Taxman's listening.
Drinks are on Aaron. No, I'm joking. Aaron, can you tell us a little, there's this idea of where we're kind of at the point we're at now, but the prospect of growing and developing something of significant scale. You did it almost single-handedly. Tell us about how you did it and your management team. Yeah, okay, off you go.
Wow, that's a big one. So I guess my first experience really was in Oldham, which is in Lancashire. My first venue was a club called Tokyo Oldham. We opened that in 1997, and it was very much the belief that it was owning a nightclub and a live music venue was very much like being a promoter, but multiple nights of the week. And it definitely wasn't. That first venue was an absolute learning curve, and just as we cracked that one, we went to an equally impoverished town, which was Ashton-under-Lyne on the outskirts of Manchester, and that was super difficult. So then we did it again, and now somehow we've ended up with 47. I guess the way we've done it is we've bought venues quite cleverly. So we're one part property company and one part operator, which then means that we're our own landlords. So when other landlords are becoming difficult in the bigger cities, we can be gentle with ourselves because we own the building we operate in and we're building a culture within that. And it's very much about focusing on that culture and driving that forward, trying to create this kind of circular economy. The UK and the UK government often forget that music is still one of our best exports globally. We create music like no other country does. And without venues like the Ferret or venues like Digital in Newcastle or Think Tank, we're not going to get those new artists. We're not going to get the new Ed Sheeran, the new Adele. We need to create this music. These venues become the tapestry of our communities. And if we lose them, and we're losing an awful lot of them at a really fast pace, that's never going to come back. And then where will we be?
Yeah, do we lose 125 last year?
125 either closed altogether or ceased putting on live music. Yeah. So
there's a real there's this thought that if everyone comes together and pulls together, we're stronger. We can underpin these activities. But Aaron, sorry, Jay, you were going to.
Yeah, I mean, I think Aaron's completely right. These grassroots spaces are hubs of cultural research and development. but also outside of that, outside of their role in creating those larger artists of the future. It's about kind of affordable access to original music. You know, those communities really rely on those spaces, particularly if you look at somewhere where they're not blessed, like Manchester City Centre. You know, you throw a rock and you hit a music venue in my city. But, you know, if you live in Atherton, the Snug's the centre of your universe.
Yeah, I think the venues that we have, you know, I can think of quite, well, a lot of examples really. The Ferret, the Continental, you know, obviously Jeremy's sitting on this panel. And, you know, places like in Sunbird, you know, Sunbird Records, you know, it's interesting that as a place we're seeing scenes developing and emerging there, you know, places where music people can coalesce and new things can happen. You know, these places, they give identity to our towns, don't they? You know, and our high streets, which, you know, in many cases are fairly bleak, aren't they? But yeah. So, Aaron, can I ask you? You know, I'm going to throw a hand grenade at you now and step away. So, what would you do if you were starting again now? How would you approach it?
I feel like we're starting again every single week. Ever since COVID, you know, we're in such a different world. It's the kind of world of pivots. So every month goes by, we're kind of changing the dynamic on what we're doing, what we're focusing on. So I think it's about being entrepreneurial, being creative, and looking where the next thing is coming from and trying to jump on that quite early. But it's certainly a lot harder now than it has ever been. I think our last 24 months has been the hardest of our last 24 years. It's and it's not getting any easier. Costs are going up, attendance is going down, cost of living is biting hard. The agents aren't really feeling that, so the agents still want loads of money for bands, and that's quite difficult to encourage them to adapt their fees to play smaller venues where they can create a cultural impact in the smaller towns. That's super difficult.
So we can incubate and develop our own in Lancashire and then export them and, you know,
Absolutely.
You know, build those connections. So, which we are doing really, you know, which is great. I mean, I love the you know, the fact that from a small northern town you can grow a really big business. You know, I love the fact that we have phenomenal. I mean, they are significant businesses, the Ferret and the Continental, but absolutely, you know, at the core of them is passion and creativity and artistry. I love the fact that you can build a, you know, it was almost a wouldn't it be good if idea. We don't have this, we would like it, and you know, that's entrepreneurial thinking. You know, really creative thinking to build a platform like Skiddle. But you also, Rich, you have Highest Point, which is like a flagship. I would say, you know, I've said there's loads of amazing things going on in Lancashire. We've got, you know, phenomenal festivals. You know, mainstream, but we've also got some really cool ones. You know, Rebellion, you know, Beat Herder, the sort of underground. More underground or specific niche orientated things. But we've also got, you know, mass entertainment. How would you describe Highest Point, Rich? You know,
A pain in the bum.
but people like it though.
Yeah, I mean, we're actually only a year off, and we'll touch on that in a minute. But Highest Point, again, the creativity, and there's a lot of talk about venues and stuff. I've always been one for just getting something done. So anywhere can be a venue these days. Anywhere can be a rehearsal space. You know, we used to have these things called garages, and your parents used to hate you. A few years ago, I mean, it was a good few years ago now, Lancaster Castle got in touch with us, and they said, oh, we want to sell tickets to ghost tours, because the prison wing used to have, well, no, sorry, inside the castle it used to be a prison, and they wanted to do ghost tours and stuff like that. And they showed us around, and I went, I'm going to do a rave in here. And they went, you're not? And I went, well, okay. And we chatted literally to the Duchy of Lancaster, the Queen, and convinced everyone that we would be perfectly sensible putting a rave on inside a prison.
Did you use the word rave when you were selling it?
Pretty much, yeah. No mincing the words. And for 3 years, we managed to pull it off. On bank holiday weekends, we went in, we took in a full rig. We had to get really convince fire officers that you can escape from a prison, despite what they say. We had for the first 2 months, like the first 2 lots of events, we had every light was plugged into a different cell because the sockets are all like half an amp, so they don't kill themselves. And we did it, and we kept going and going and going until the Mail on Sunday wrote a piece about us, because we'd booked Pete Tong, and the Mail on Sunday managed to piece together that us somehow booking Pete Tong was kicking the prison service out and giving her, Pete Tong MBE, a resident slot in a nightclub. It was the most creative piece of work I've ever seen in my life, but the Duchy of Lancaster don't like falling out of the Mail on Sunday. And that was it, that was the end of it. And we'd already booked, stupidly, without seeing it, Hacienda Classical. And the idea was to put it in the courtyard, in the castle, and it was all that. And they came down on us and just went, look, it's not you, it's the Mail on Sunday. And we're like, fine. So we had to find somewhere, and we had to find it quickly because we'd booked it. And this was like the September or the October, and we were supposed to be doing the May. And I said, well, I used to play in that park up on the hill there. Let's go and see them. We walked in and spoke to the park manager, a gentleman called Will. He reminds me of this day every time I see him, and literally said, oh, can we just like put a party on? And he just went, yeah. So he didn't. Lancaster took a risk on us, and they knew because we'd been working with the Duchy, we couldn't be that bad. And we managed to piece together the first Hacienda Classical show outside. I mean, it was basically the second show they'd ever done, and it worked. It worked really well. Anyone that knows Williamson's Park in Lancaster, it's hilly. There's literally no flat land anywhere. There's loads of listed stuff. I mean, if you went to anyone, and there's a lot of guys there that have put big shows on, and looked at it, they go, no, don't be silly. And we're starting to realise we should have listened. But we got to a point where we can get 10,000 people in a day. And we've been doing that, and we've been doing that the last 5 years. The thing is, we've not made a penny. You know, it's people see you put a festival on and they see 10,000 people there, but what they don't see is 20% goes to the VAT man. What they don't see is the PRS wanting some money for people playing their own records. I don't understand that at a festival. Like, I just don't.
It is what it is, though, unfortunately.
No, I understand, but yeah. For your ticket money, you know, £100 ticket, you're giving £25 away in tax before you do it.
Yeah, Daniel from PRS.
Well,
no, I'm joking.
And then it's all the other bits. It is the production. It is the security. You know, we worked out that by pleasing the residents and making it safe and complying with bits of Martin's Law and stopping kids jumping over the fence because they're bored, because they've nothing else to do, we spend close to £100,000 fencing off an empty venue and securing it. And you're just like, that isn't sustainable, because this year you've not been able to put ticket prices up. There's no movement in that sense. And then what's also happened this year is people like Oasis, people like Taylor, people like Coldplay putting on these mega shows, demanding £300 a ticket, which is great. You get to see those environments, but that takes that money out of the marketplace for the independents, because none of us are getting paid anymore.
Though it's interesting you mentioned Coldplay. There's loads of really good stuff there. Coldplay have very generously, through the lobbying of MVT, they're donating some of that ticket money to underpin grassroots music. So
yes,
I think we should applaud Coldplay for that. You know, but they can afford to, I guess.
Oh, we can do better than that.
Yeah.
Put your prejudices
Put your
aside.
hands together for Coldplay. They're not even here, and here they are. No. Also, Daniel, you know, I was joking about PRS because actually that money that is, you know, goes to the songwriters. So if you're a songwriter and your music's played in festivals or clubs, Erin perhaps has a slightly different perspective because he has the big bills. But you know.
Yeah, I think on big festivals when you've got particularly electronic music, a lot of those artists are not represented by by PRS, so that money goes to paying Elton John and the Rolling Stones rather than going to the actual artists that are delivering it. So it does need to be a better categorization of that within PRS, which we are working with them on. But also with festivals, all your money is made in the last 20% of the ticket sales. So if you've got a festival that doesn't quite hit that capacity, you stand to hit $1 million loss or something, really bad. So the profits are very low and they have very high risk. So it's really getting that balancing right, which is why we've seen so many festivals cancel this summer.
So how would, if someone wanted to play at Highest Point or at the Ferret or the Conti, how would they go about, how do people get to work with you, to anyone who wants to jump in?
I think music discovery has gone massively backwards in the last 10 years. I know it's very easy to access music now, but we get an inbox full of tracks. You just can't bother listening to any of them. If you want to get my attention, send me a CD. I've still got something to play it on, or a USB, because you carry it around in your car, you can listen to it, whatever. DJ mixes all day long, they're so boring. So, we tend to approach people because somebody was saying about it before. There's a lot of action around it. We did loads of work with the lottery winners in the early days. It's amazing where they've got to now. We're very, very supportive of artists like that, and it's the same at Skiddle. If something reaches us in an interesting way, we're going to listen to it. If you just send, here's my latest track, sorry, but no one's going to listen to that unless it's the job to listen to it.
So to get on Highest Point, Rich, I mean, obviously you're using quite well-known acts there. How much is organic from Lancashire on that bill?
In the electronic world, quite a lot. I mean, again, we're in a really complicated position because you only have so many hours. The festival costs a lot to put on, so it's a fine balance between somebody thinking that's worth my ticket money, because we've put a lot of great artists on. There's Lowe's we've had on a few times. We've had, like I said, we've done a lot of work with the lottery winners. We used to have a stage for up and coming, but then that's a prime piece of flat land and 60 people are watching those bands. So we took it away and we put electronic music on and we put Sasha on there, and you've got 2,000 people in there.
It's the economic. So it's not straightforward, is it? The books have to balance.
Yeah,
and we're saying that is difficult to achieve for all of these, from grassroots to showcase festivals.
Yeah, because we get one weekend a year. Yeah. That's our show, but there's lots of other, we do lots of little gigs. We do other stuff as well. It's always worth getting in touch with someone, and they will. And Aaron's got a lot. The Conti, the people like that, you're going to notice what's happening in the circuit, and we kind of approach people. But that's just the nature of our event. Yeah.
Well, we've overshot time-wise, I'm afraid. Thank you for bearing with us and being patient. I'm just going to, is there any one last thought or piece of advice that I can get from each of our panelists? Mike, go on, Mike, then.
No, I was just going to say, just talking about how you access as an artist, probably one of the biggest challenges that we've got, and some of the work that MVT have been highlighting on a live perspective, is the grassroots movement. One of the things that we're recognising is grassroots is really important, and funding that is vital. But we've got to start thinking about complete ecosystem. And one of the biggest voids in venues is in that mid-tier venue space. So when you talk about grassroots music venues, what we're doing is we're going to produce and start to develop fantastic talent coming through, but they haven't got the ability to refine their craft in the sort of 8,000-9,000 capacity venues upwards. And that's where we've got the sort of bigger void. So there is definitely something that we're working on at the moment which will make a difference. The work that MVT are doing, similarly, we've just actually raised a £100 million fund to actually buy freeholds and lease back to SME businesses. So we're doing a similar thing, but we are focused more on electronic. We are accommodating for live, but obviously live is accommodated for quite well. So from our perspective, our biggest concern is that whole ecosystem. We need to start thinking about electronic and live music artists, whether you're a band or a DJ, being able to go through that process and refine your craft all the way up. Because all we're seeing at the moment is you've got grassroots venues, there's a void, and then people, the limited amount of people who get the opportunity to go to Highest Point or Warehouse Project or something like that. We're missing huge amounts of talent in that middle ground.
So pipeline, we need to have the full
100%.
the full pipeline, which we can have if we add Lancashire, if we make it all one place, which it is. Matt,
To build on that, really, the best way to get things done is from ground up, meeting top down, and somewhere in the middle there's a sweet spot that enables things to be resolved, I think, both at a regional level and then at a national level. So we work with MVT through the Music Board, we work with Live, we work with all the national organisations. A lot of the problems are shared across the country. You can start to resolve them locally, you can learn off each other, but you resolve the problems locally, then it starts to address the national challenges as well.
Great, thank you. Rich, last thoughts, final thoughts? Just do it.
Just get on with it. Yeah, if you want to do something, you want to be in a band, just buy a guitar. You know, if you want to learn to mix, get some really cheap decks, and you don't need the top end equipment. Just go out and just do stuff. You'll get somewhere.
Aaron, I kind of want to say no guts, no glory, mate, for you. But
Well, it is kind of that, really. It's about having a passion and being entrepreneurial and thinking outside the box. When people say no, don't just agree with that. Just say, well, why not? Well, and then go and do it anyway and prove them wrong. You know, it's about having the balls to get out there and just do things, because that's the other way you're going to get noticed. If you just kind of sat there emailing people, we get bombarded with emails. That's no good. We want to see something that's got some flares and it's got some attention, something that's ultimately going to sell tickets and move people through venues.
thank you. Jay?
I think probably just picking up on the Coldplay thing, that money is, it's going to take a while because obviously they've got to do the shows first, it's got to be mechanised and distributed. That money will go to grassroots venues, also go to grassroots promoters and artists. So there is a plan for that to kind of go out to the kind of wider ecosystem. But what I would say is in that gap, what we're seeing is venues are in like a hope bubble where, you know, the work that Lloyd and I do in the emergency service is essentially kind of trying to get venues out to a point where there is meaningful drip down funding from those ends, that part of the industry that's making gigantic profits. You know, that end of the industry in 2023 made more money than it's ever made before in the history of everything. You know, and the grassroots sector had the worst year worst year ever. And so this kind of, what I would say is, you know, I probably don't need to say it to people here that you should go out and support your grassroots music venues because hopefully we're all complicit in the work. But certainly, I think, you know, what we're looking at now is trying to get those venues over the next year.
Well, you know, we have representatives from our civic institutions here today, so, you know, I'm sure they can help. You know, it's very enlightening. Jeremy, you and your team, your local heroes, you know, mean that sincerely. Your final thoughts?
Well, I think just for us, I think it's just kind of get in touch, come down and get involved. I mean, today, Matt and Rob, who book at the Continental and Ferret, are here, just on the table at the back. So if anybody wants to speak to us about playing or just getting involved in any way they want to, please do afterwards.
Thank you. So we'll take a thank you to the panel, amazing panel. Round of applause, please. And Coldplay.